So we finally made it after, if this thing doesn't, stops freezing. Yeah, all right. So we're back in. All right. So we're live with my first podcast of March after suffering from a crazy, crazy, crazy flu. And today I've got Dale Dupree. He is the leader of the Sales Rebellion. I have followed you for quite some time, and to be on the other side of the screen now, interviewing someone like yourself who's achieved so much is quite a privilege, mate. So I will hand the introduction over to
Well,
you
thanks for the kind
to do so
words, dude.
gracefully yourself.
I
Who
am
are
very
you, Dale?
grateful
What
to
do
be
you
on
do,
this
and
show.
why do you
I'm
do it?
appreciative of the invite. My name's Dale Dupree. My friends, they call me the Copier Warrior. So I spent about 13 years in the B2B space selling the most boring, bland, vanilla product in the world. And I'll fight anybody that disagrees or thinks that they have something more boring than a copy machine. So I I went from that to basically I should say first that
Oh, wow. Okay.
getting into that wasn't necessarily like the dream by any means. I don't think anybody actually wakes up in the morning and says, "Yeah, I want to sell copy machines one day" in the first place. But I was actually a musician. I turned down all the college scholarships at 17 years old. I toured the United States with a band, got signed to a major record label, played music. That's really where I cut my teeth in sales ultimately, and then got thrown into the lion's den of the copier world when I decided I wanted to build a career and start a family. And the music life wasn't very conducive for those types of things that I dreamed of achieving for myself. My father owned a copier company, so I bent a knee and begged him for a job, and he said yes, and stuck with me for a couple years of sucking really bad. And then I became one of the best sales reps that there ever was to exist inside of the state of Florida. And it's not just an arrogance or a pride thing there. It's the accolades and achievements that I was able to get for myself and be awarded for myself through the manufacturers, my organization, other associations as well too, which led me into ultimately deciding that I had something different. It wasn't just that I sold better than other people. That really wasn't the case. It was that I had a different focus entirely, and that people were more attracted to the way that I sold because of it. So I went from copier sales into building the dream of the Sales Rebellion, which I lead today. I started that in 2019. I've been doing it for 5 years now. It's been a lot of fun, a lot of ups and downs. The creed of the organization is that we're here to help reps to choose legendary, and the concept of that is ultimately that we think that sales is the greatest profession on the face of the earth. And with that said, we believe that because we think that every single interaction that a human has with another human can be life changing. And salespeople get to do it literally every day with complete strangers. So, because of that, we take a lot of pride in what it is that we do. We help reps to choose between the identity ultimately of being a status quo representative of their firm, of their product, or becoming something that actually impacts the community and builds a legacy for themselves.
Oh, look, I agree. Sales was the one thing that gave me a second chance at life. Genuinely. I don't know if you know much about my story, but I was very much a rebellious child ever since 4 to 5 years old. I cursed out the security. She was a woman security guard. That's nice. Cursed out the woman security guard because she said I couldn't leave and go home. So I left school, and the principal said, "This kid is going to have some major problems if you don't get him sorted out now." Fast forward 20 years, I ended up in 3 or 4 rehabs, multiple county jails, and then a 3-year prison stint because I decided to pursue the path of opiates. I'm sure you know about that. In New Jersey, it was a really, really big epidemic. I had an ACL repair. ACL repair led to a heavy dose of oxycodone. That led to a very, very bad drug addiction. And then I landed myself a prison sentence. But when I got out, the only thing I could get in terms of employment was a security guard position. And I almost relapsed being a security guard, mainly because of the boredom. And when I started to look into more of a sales role, I started in financial sales for like bogus courses. And that I ended up seeing that I was able to get that limelight, that attention. People were like, "Who is this fucking kid? He sounds so good. He's got this accent." And because I grew up in America, I was born in the UK, but I moved to America in '99, lived there for 15 years, and then came back to the UK. I always had that New Jersey swag. I did college in Orlando, Florida, always up and down Route 50. I know my thing. And that gave me something different. And as I progressed through my career, sales was the only thing that allowed me to outshine everybody in my way. So I agree with you in terms of just sales being one of the greatest professions. It gives you any opportunity you
Yeah,
want. But when
I
did
love
you
your story, by the way.
discover
I the
like the
first
real spark
and
about
also I
you?
had a question actually. You said Highway 50, so does that mean you went to UCF or did you go to Valencia? Yeah. Yeah, so I'm a
Valencia.
well, I mean, back in the day, they didn't let anybody in, you
I
know.
wasn't allowed in UCF.
but now it's a very prestigious place now. So, but uh, I grew up in Orlando. I'm an Orlandoian. I'm a third generation Orlandoian, as a matter of fact, which is very rare. And a matter of like honestly, like most of us have left, which kind of sucks. But I love the memories of driving down Highway 50 when it was 2 lanes. Like the traffic was so bad. It's good times. So what clicked for me
Yep.
personally, where it started to
Yep.
click was at an early age, man. Like if I were to go back to being 15 years old, even I had actually attempted suicide as a teenager. I didn't know what I was doing, so it was more or less just like a botched job. But you know, I I did everything I could to die, and I just carved up my
I've done
arm
one of
basically
those.
with a knife, and wasn't really sure what I was doing. My mom came
Yep.
home and basically like interrupted the process and saved my life as I was like figuring it out, and that moment for me was pretty intense and
Mm-hmm.
interesting because ultimately when you ask the question, I kind of like my brain goes there because something triggered in me that day that wasn't awake before. It had been sleeping, and the thing that was sleeping ultimately was my ambition, my pride, my joy, my love
Mm-hmm.
for myself. I actually, unfortunately, again, 12 years later, tried to commit suicide again. And I struggle with depression, so it's not like it's something that just like came out of nowhere. I had battled it for those 12 years and tried my best, but stayed very silent. But in the process of that first instance to that second
Mm-hmm.
instance, there was a lot of growth and a big, massive awakening for myself. And I failed a lot in there as well too, where at one point I thought being more arrogant and prideful about myself and who I am was really important, and that it led me to like the path of anger and almost like in a blind state where I said things to people, I did things to people that I'll always regret for the rest of my life, even though I've even gotten forgiveness from some of them. I'll always regret it. I'll never be able to ultimately like get past those moments because I know how bad and wrong they were now. But at the time I thought, well, this is how a man operates, right? In a very stereotypical way, if you will. And then this is
Mm-hmm.
the way that you fight something like depression in your life. So I just didn't have like the right kind of mentorship that I was leaning into at the time to be able to get around those things. But fast forward to being 21 and working for my dad, like then all of a sudden I had the coup de grace of mentors, one of the most incredible men in the world. My father was my best friend, and he helped me to see a lot of the things that I couldn't see. And even though like I didn't want to see them in certain instances, he'd be giving me a lesson. I'd be like, shut up, old man, kind of be like what would go through my head, right? Like any teenage kid, 21-year-old kid in the first place. But it got better and better over time, and the awakening
Of
slowly continued
course.
to happen. And I think the thing that people need to hear though is that like the struggle never left, and it got better, but it got worse. If you really think about my story, and inside of it getting worse, it doesn't mean that I was doing something wrong. It just meant that I was
Mm-hmm.
continuing to ultimately like seek out greater success for myself because it got worse because I risked more, I took more chances, I got more uncomfortable, I sought discomfort like as a literal principle in my life. And some people might hear that and be like, well shoot, I'm not going to do that in that case since it drives people to attempted
Mm-hmm.
suicide, right? But like it's important to do those things. And for myself, I probably would have, just like silently left. But instead, because I was such a loud person at this point in my walk and a booming voice and an influential human in my community, that it was, even though I was pretty silent about my depression and my struggles and where I was at that point, people could feel it. My dad is like the divinity that saved my life that day. That, and the actual act not being able to be carried through, basically. So I don't want to get into gory details by any means, but the thought though being that, like, my
Mm-hmm.
dad even said to me, like, coming to work early that day, and he never did that, like the kind of early that I would do, like 5 in the morning. He was like, "Yeah, I just had a feeling I was supposed to be here. And are you doing all right?" And, like, just things like
Mm-hmm.
that like really like put me into a completely different state of mind, that I started to recognize that, like, there's purpose behind my life, and that sales has more connected to it than just a transaction ultimately as well too. Because what I was witnessing in this stage of my life as well was, people coming to me and like thanking me genuinely from the bottom of their heart for doing something for them that nobody else could do. And I know that sounds like kind of weird, or maybe like, what are you talking about, like doing something nobody else could do? Well, listen, like, if I
Mm-hmm.
could give somebody like 30 minutes back in their day because of a problem that they had every day for 30 minutes, right, that to a human is more valuable than a lot of us understand or know. And that person coming back to me and basically being like, "Yo, I've got like literally 4 hours in
Mm-hmm.
my week,
Yep.
because of you, additional, and I'm super grateful for it. I'm less stressed, whatever the case. Like, if you need anything, let me know. If I can refer you to other people, holler at your boy." Like, when I heard things like that, I started to realize, like, I'm gaining trust with people. I'm making an impact on people beyond just like I sold something and made money. And, because a lot of times in sales, we're told, "Hey, this is your job is this. You go and you transact, and then we pay you. And if you don't
Mm-hmm.
transact, we fire you." It's like what we're told, but we're rarely ever given the perspective of other people matter more than the sale. And
Yeah, it's
ultimately,
very
that you can
true.
build something very beautiful from a community standpoint if you lean into that thought process, that you're out pushing a product, sure, but really you're fixing problems, and you're helping people to get out of the state of debauchery, if you will, that they're in. Because a lot of the times, like, how people are literally enslaved to a product or a service is pretty gross. And a lot of organizations, especially like big companies, they do it on purpose. They know how to like cull the herd, when they need to, and how to get it exactly where they need it, to keep eating and drinking from their trough in the first place. So they're all in cahoots. It's not a conspiracy, y'all. This is the real world. Like, capitalism
Mm-hmm.
has created something beautiful for a lot of us, and then a lot of other instances, it's created something very damning for a buyer market at the same time too. So I chose to be the thing that was very different inside of my community. And like, again, like, my own personal experiences are what carried me there, but ultimately it was the outcomes of those like seeking those things and achieving those things that made me stay.
So with all right, that's quite interesting because I was one of the reps that when I first got into sales, it was about proving a point to earn the commission, right? It was just the commission at first. I didn't care that a banking executive was going to learn about AML risk or he was going to spend 8 hours in a freaking boardroom with other people and go through a fucking PowerPoint presentation essentially to get value and help increase their CPD points, whatever. That was nothing for me. Then I got into selling delegate places at conferences. So I sold legal and compliance conferences. And I had no interest in giving a lawyer a freaking seat at another conference about KYC. Like, I didn't care about that. It was, again, how do I become number one on the leaderboard? And then I went into another company and I sold one-to-one meetings for semiconductors, the most boring shit of my life. Then demand generation webinars, then built an agency and selling appointments. Even though it's my business, selling appointments is the trashiest. Like, I hated it. It was so fucking annoying because nobody gave you no matter how hard you try and how good you do, you would never get the respect. Now, moving on from all of that to what I do now is I'm just me. I don't have a product, I don't have a service, but I can connect people. That's one thing I can do very, very well. I can connect people and I can open doors. And the most recent company I'm working for right now, like the first time in my life, I didn't have to ask for money. They're paying me extra money just because they said, I can't believe you've done this. I'm sending you a bonus. I can't believe you. And I'm talking thousands and thousands of pounds of bonuses. I'm like, okay, this is quite cool. But how do you find that meaningful purpose from where you sit? You have much more experience than me. That meaningful purpose to sell a product that you may not really believe in. So, prime example, a copier machine. A copier machine copies paper, maybe speeds up a bunch of processes in, I don't know. How do you help somebody see that purpose in selling that product to make somebody's life genuinely easier
Yeah, so it's
versus
like a
I
lot
just
of it
need to
has to do
hit
with
this
your leader,
commission.
right?
I
So,
need to hit this
my
fucking
dad didn't
target
overly
so I don't get
pressure me
fired.
about money, but I was on a commission draw, and a lot of people don't know what that is, but I basically made a very nominal amount of money, a small amount of money a week. I mean, we're talking like $200 a week to sell something, and if I like, let's say I sold $1,000 commission that month. Well, I owed the company $800, so I'd get $200 from that sale. So it was basically a commission only job, but my dad was,
Okay,
willing
I know, I
to give
remember
me a
those.
draw,
Yep.
a piece of the pie like up front. But then when you maxed your draw, you didn't get any more, right? So and the max for the draw was 2,000. So I had, essentially I had like 2 months worth of pay that I would get, and then, I wouldn't have any money. And so I wasn't going to get fired. I just was going to be literally broke and have no money at all, period. So that first and foremost, that made me have to really like deeply dive into who I
Mm-hmm.
was and believe in myself more effectively because yeah, my dad also was he was a very kind and gentle man, but he knew how to teach a good lesson, especially to his legacies, me and his kids. And so like, the thought of, well, maybe he'll give me an extra check. I pushed that boundary at one point and I did not get paid. So I had to come to the conclusion for myself that, well, what do you want, man? You want to go work at McDonald's, or do you want to like see the sky is the limit here ultimately, and that you're being given like full autonomy to create whatever it is that you want? Then I sat down and I said to myself, okay, cool. So like I sell this
Mm-hmm.
boring ass thing, like that everybody seems to hate, because here I am like 4 or 5 months into this thing, and for the most part, I'm just like met with a bunch of rejection and negativity from people like, oh, you sell copiers, please leave, please go away. And they're just like straight up, like no questions asked. It's pretty wild.
Mm-hmm.
So in the process of like really understanding that, what I figured out was, well, nobody buys a product. They buy trust and credibility. They buy the experience that you give to them. They buy the network that you open up for them. They buy the expertise that you provide. And so what I recognized real quickly was like, well, it's not ever going to be about the copy machine in the first place at this stage. Like there's no way in hell it's ever going to be like that. Like if this is the way that people are, as a majority
Mm-hmm.
of the marketplace. And so I stopped really thinking too much about the copier in the first place. Eventually though, I will say this, that like I leaned back into the copier because I realized that it was like the medium, that it was actually like if me, my personality, the trust that I was building with people, the credibility that I was earning, the network I was building, the ability to serve, that was creating my ability to serve these people in my mind, like that was the paint, and the canvas was the copy machine. Like I had to have this
Mm-hmm.
thing though ultimately that I gave, because people be like, wow, this
Yep.
marketing thing that you just did as an example was really cool and really awesome, and I really liked it. What do you do? So I also recognize that like, well, people also, you got to tie back to what it is that you're doing ultimately and how you're helping them. And really those are the things I leaned into, dude. I leaned into like I could care less if people told me no, because
Mm-hmm.
I knew and I had experienced the outcome of what it looks like to really ultimately earn someone's trust and to do right by them, and what the outcome looked like. And that was sales to me. So when somebody said no, I knew that, like, well, they're just putting me in this basket with everybody else, and essentially stereotyping me as a salesperson, and not giving me the
Mm-hmm.
opportunity to really do much more than spend the next 30 seconds in my car crying about the fact that they just said no and that everybody sucks and why won't anybody talk to me. Which created a perseverant mindset ultimately as well. But like I never changed my mindset of when I walked out
Yep.
that door, that I wasn't like offended or hurt, or instead I was like, who blames people for their reaction, like to salespeople like this. Who blames them? Like, who would blame them, knowing the things that they've been through? Because I had also started to experience like what people
Mm.
had, been put through in order to buy something in the first place. The lying, the manipulation, the thievery, this idea of ultimately like promising too much and misrepresenting your product. Like I'd seen it all at that point too. So it was like, oh, well, I get it. I get that this is the way that
Yeah.
people are. So I never, because of
Mm-hmm.
all that, dude, I never
Mm-hmm.
really leaned into the copy. Like your boss will tell you to, right? Your manager, the person that's over you in the sales department, they'll tell you to like learn the product, understand all the bells and whistles. No, it's not like my dad didn't have people in the company that were doing that, like influencing that with me, but there was always this little like angel on my shoulder, and my dad, like coming in every once in a while and being like, "Hey, what are you doing?" And I'd say, "I'm learning the copier," and he'd go, "Nobody cares." you know all the stuff you're about to learn about it, nobody cares. What they care about is like what you can do to fix their problem. What are their problems? And I'd say, well, I mean, I gotta go ask them, I guess. He'd say, we'll go ask them. And when you learn that, and when you learn the consistency of the problem that people have inside of a vertical, inside of a stereotype, essentially, right? Like at a medical facility, like they send a bunch of faxes, 90% of them have this issue. Now you can learn that on the copier, and you can learn like how you fix that. And when they get to that part of the conversation, you can have it. He's like, but in the beginning, they don't care. You're not going to walk in and go, "Hey, do you have a fax? Because you probably have this problem, and I can fix it." They've heard that before. But if instead you go and relate to them, you build trust with them, you
Mm.
grow with them, you impact them, and
Yep.
eventually,
Yep.
they ask you like, "Well, how can you help me?" That's sales. So, that's it in a nutshell. The way that I changed the way that I thought about the copy machine and how I leaned deeply into it.
I think it's helpful. It's very helpful to know that because a lot of people won't get that. They will just, again, focus on features, products, and benefits, all of the stuff that really doesn't matter. And what I've learned to realize over all of this time is I won't work with anybody just for money anymore because I've done it and been burned like beyond belief, beyond belief. I will only work with somebody if I truly believe in what they're doing and if I like the person. If the person's a prick, if they take, for example, if they take a long time to sign a contract, I won't work with them. If it takes long to sign a contract with you, I have no interest in working with you because I'm sure when I work with you, it's going to be fucking twice as bad. I remember one guy, he made, we flew people across the fucking entire country from UK to San Francisco. Like, these are expensive flights. He went, the person who was on the account, for 11 months, sat and fucking went through this contract with this guy around the whole company. How you're going to activate the market, how you're going to validate leads, how you're going to find our ICP in these new markets, all of it. And at the end of it, the guy didn't even last 3 months and he shorted us on the payment. So, like, unless you really, really, truly believe in what you are doing or what you're servicing or selling, I don't see any point in doing it. What do you think is the biggest problem, though, that sales is experiencing right now? So, as a leader of a rebellion, it's usually to fight a cause or to change something that's broken, moving to a place of or an outcome where people are happier, people that can really enjoy what they do, and I'm aligned with that. But what do you think needs to change? Where we're at in 2024, we've got all this AI now with being able to modify scripting, language, research. You've got people who are breaking trust, earning trust. You've got people who are trying to build brands who are fictitious or frauds. Some people are building a true brand. Some people have true communities. But again,
I think it's
I think there's a lot of things
oversaturated
that need to
with
change. What's the first thing that comes to mind for
people
you that
that
needs to change in sales?
they don't truly understand what it what sales actually means and what the purpose of the job is. I think it's oversaturated with those people. Because of that, I think you have really poor strategies around outbound. As an example, you have really poor strategies around discovery sessions. I think it all starts though in like the way that we bring people in. We paint this picture of like, either it's like when I was younger, it was, oh, you don't have a degree and you've only played in the band, where are you going to get a job? At Starbucks? Like, and if you were in Orlando, it was Barney's Coffee. so, so I was like, well, what could I do? And people told me, they said, well, you could get a sales job anywhere, and so like, here's how it was painted for me. It was like the only choice Like that sucks. It wasn't the greatest choice. It was the only choice, but I believe it's the greatest job in the world. And after I got into it and understood it better, look at me now. Right. But I think the problem is we
Mm-hmm.
paint this picture so poorly that then we like literally just destroy everything. So in
Yep.
2024, like, no, who the hell opens a cold email anymore? And people that do are typically like, they're probably brand new to business, to be quite frank. Like, if we're being really, really dead ass about it, it's because they've never gotten an email. Like they just opened a new business and they just opened a business account, and here come these emails, and they're like, oh shoot, what's this? Like that's literally the only way people are opening emails. And sure, there's plenty of people out there like, hey, I just sent a very highly personalized, really very tailored email to somebody yesterday, and they opened it up and we set an appointment. Like, I don't care, like, because when we when we dig deeper into that one email you sent that got one appointment, like, but you sent 10,000 emails. So like, how are you really helping people? How are you really doing much? Sure, like, you're finding that one person, that's nice and all, but like burning 10,000 down on your way to get there is a crazy thought. And automation and AI and those types of tools like make it easier for people to take this like quote unquote high road in sales and be more tailored and perfected in their messaging to make you feel better, but it's fake. All of it is fake. So what's the point? Especially as people continue to figure out that it's fake and understand that it's fake, and that you're just putting a prompt into a system that goes out and scrapes the internet and comes back and says, hey, Dale, I see you went to school at Circle Christian. What classes did you take? And I'm like, I was homeschooled, like, did you even look at, like, your AI tool sucks, like that's a homeschool organization. I didn't take any classes, like I just did curriculum all day with my mom in the kitchen, like it was terrible. No, I'm just kidding. It was great. But again, like, that's the thought process, right? Like, outbound is so oversaturated with a bunch of people that just think that they're going to come in, click go, and make money. And because of that, we're
Mm-hmm.
destroying it. We destroy it through cold calling. The way people do cold calls sucks. Like, nobody can get on the phone and have a freaking conversation with another person anymore, bro. It's insane. I got a call just the other day, even from somebody that's like, hey, did you get my emails? And I'm like, yeah, I responded.
Mm-hmm.
And they're like, oh, perfect. And I'm like, perfect? What do you mean perfect? They're like, yeah, so like, I'll go back, check the email, it's perfect. And I'm like, you didn't see the email? He's like, I probably, let me get with this person. I probably did, maybe. Mind if I ask you a question though before I get? And I'm like, no. Like, just talk to me. Like, when I
Wow.
say, yeah, I emailed you back, that's when you say, well, that sucks. I must not have gotten it. I feel like an idiot right now. Like, this constant positivity of salespeople really bums me out, to be honest with you, bro. Like, to say
It's
things like
because
that, like in the midst of me being like, well, I emailed you back, like, oh, perfect, man, perfect. Like, what? Okay. What does that even mean? Like, hey, I'm not interested. Perfect. Do you mind if I ask you one more thing? It's like, people are so
what the fuck is that?
dense
Like,
when they're having a
it's
conversation over the
because
phone
people
that are sales. Yeah.
they're answering. The thing is, they're usually answering to follow their own script or their own narrative. And when this was, what, 8 years ago, I used to do something similar where I'd get on the phone and I had this thing, this inoculation tactic. Hey, I know you're busy. I know I'm an interruption. I'm going to be very quick, and then I'd lead with it. And without listening, actually listening to the person, I was never able to have a proper conversation because it was so scripted, and it was so um that's the word, it was just so scripted. And until I started to actually listen to what the other person on that phone was saying, that was when I was able to progress or advance relationships. And I think that's one of the biggest problems they have is, so that guy calling you, he's calling you probably with the intention of, I just want to book a meeting with you. He doesn't give a shit that he sent an email. He doesn't know. He probably doesn't even know he sent the email if it's done from marketing. And then when you are actually giving him feedback or having a conversation with him, he's fucking lost in the source. So I see what you're saying. Now, given the fact that there are these trust issues with sales individuals, I've been through situations where somebody sold to me and I was really excited to buy the product, and after I bought the product, I felt so shit. I was like, this guy's a fucking scumbag. I hated it. Over the next 4, 5, even 10 years, we're going to see more of it, if not worse, maybe even some better. Where do you see us in 10 years? The domain we're in, go to market, outbound, cold calling, cold emailing, using social to expand your profile.
Yeah, I don't
Where
think
do you
that the
see our
things you're
industry in
describing
10 years,
are
given the
new
fact that it's moving
to
at the pace it
our
is right now?
generation. Well, what I should say is like our generation created it, or like the one before us created it, or the one before them even created it. I mean, I think you can. Todd Capone does this much better than I do, but I think historically you can go back into sales and you can
Mm-hmm.
find that like there's been snake oil salesmen since the beginning of time. The thought being that ultimately in this generation and day and age, like the internet exists, so like you can't hide anymore like you
Mm-hmm.
used to. People are getting more exposed, and so they wear a pretty interesting veil because of it. And what I mean by that is
Mm-hmm.
that like it's a veil that a lot of people can't see through. Like I've suffered from it. I've suffered from it in sales. But the same thing is, or in the same breath, it's like, hey man, like who in your life has ever done the same kind of stuff to you as well too? Like, did you have a friend one time that stabbed you in the back? Did you have a business partner at some point that was extremely unreliable, or did you trusted and you shouldn't have? Did you have a spouse at
Mm-hmm.
one point that was like living a second life, and not telling you about it? Like a lot of us have that story, that sales story of like a bad experience. We have it in a lot of different areas of
Yep.
life. This is why I believe that sales is life, and that the more that we box sales into this like business box, the further we get away from like the ultimate
Mm-hmm.
outcomes that we desire to have with it. But at the same time,
Yep.
the better it is for all of us that don't put it in a box, because people feel almost immediately that we have a difference that we provide, even in like the first interaction with us. Like people can just sense that there's something different here. This is nice. This is not a terrible experience. I'm not like reeling from this. And I think those just like the initial fact ultimately of the fact of the idea that
Mm-hmm.
the negative stereotypes have always existed and in sales, and they're like very prevalent in our personal lives. It comes down to this: is like, who's going to be so aware that not only as a salesperson they're going to like treat people better, but as buyers we're going to treat salespeople differently as well too. Because I know this might sound crazy, but if somebody wrongs me in life or even in sales, right? If somebody wrongs me, you know what I do, man? I forgive them. And like I make it a point to do that, to say like, hey, no harm, no foul. I'm sorry that it had to work out like this, but um, it's I forgive you. It's all good. And that's what changes people's mindset and perception about their own actions, even,
Mm-hmm.
because in most cases they're met with turmoil and anger and frustration. And like a lot of people, because of that, like a lot
Yep.
of people like us as humans, I should say, naturally we feed off things like that. So a salesperson, like being found out that they lied, they don't care, because like what they get for lying is this check that goes into the bank that's like so sick, right? And then sure, there's a little bit of this like backlash from the person, but they just ignore it. Imagine that the
Mm-hmm.
person was to instead say like, hey, I realize that you screwed me over and I just want to let you know that I forgive you. Like that salesperson would be like, what'd you just say? Yeah, and make them think a lot differently, and make them think a lot differently, bro. I mean, and it happened to me at an early
What just
stage in my
happened?
life, and my dad was a great mentor toward this particular subject as well too, and
Mm-hmm.
just a man of his word and practiced what he preached, very much a servant leader. So I'm built different because of that. I've had some pretty terrible stuff happen to me in my life, and I've forgiven every single one of those individuals, and I have seen the fruit of doing that for myself, as well as seeing the fruit of what it does for those individuals too. So I think again, like it really just comes back to this idea that people need to be better, all of us, no matter what it is that we're doing, or who it is that we ultimately identify as: salesperson, marketer, HR, CEO. It doesn't really matter. Like we're all in the same boat. We can all lie, we can all cheat, we can all steal, and sure, people can continue to destroy the reputation of salespeople, but that's why there's a rebellion, and anybody can join it, that seeks ultimately to get away from those negative stereotypes in the first place. And the more that people find this, the more it will live on. It's not about Dale Dupree. If it was, I would have named it Dale Dupree Sales Training, right? It's about people, and it's about community, and it's about taking our profession back for generations to come.
Yep. So, was there ever a major low point in your life where sales was, well, not even just sales, but you had a massive learning experience from it and it's helped add to
Oh, man,
the
that's
level of
loaded,
resilience
bro.
you have today?
I struggled with depression, like I said, and struggled with attempted suicide twice in my life. I it's divinity that I'm alive. I believe that God has a calling on my life ultimately because of the survival. That like I'm not supposed to be here. I'm a statistic. It's a pretty crazy thought, but
Mm,
yeah, when I go back to like my childhood, I think a lot of us can relate to this. Like there's a lot of people that are they had great lives, but there was like this one thing that happened. A lot of us had a not so good upbringing even, but then there was this one really awesome thing
mm-hmm,
that changed us, at some certain point. So like it can go both ways, no matter how you spin it. Good can become bad, bad can become good, is the thought process. And so for me, when I look at my life and the things that molded and shaped me, man, I would say like one of the first
mm-hmm,
things was being like having a good leader and steward over my life and my time as with my father. That's somebody that he leaned into me deeply, from the perspective of wanting me to figure out who I was. He saw it was weird. He saw it was quirky. He saw it was out of the box thinker. I mean, like this is one of my old business cards from when I sold copy machines. Like, who the hell has a business card like this? Like, nobody would hire me, right? But everybody bought for me, but nobody wanted to hire me. They were
that's
afraid of
awesome,
something
bro.
like this. So like my dad believed in that guy, and
That's
there's like for
awesome,
me,
though.
there's
Yeah,
something to that ultimately that changed my life, and
yeah,
the way that my father like led with his faith, and he was passionate about people, and just the general ability to be able to have a mentor in the flesh every day. Man, I'll never take that for granted. I see it as a privilege. 9 out of 10 of my friends didn't have a dad, or their dad was an alcoholic and just on the couch all the time, or whatever the case, right? Like, so I get that I had something very special, and it is the catalyst of change in my life,
mm-hmm.
and why I am who I am today, and why I make the decisions that I make today as well too.
So, how do you encourage people to remain resilient then? So, you've had experiences in your life that you had a mentor and your father was a great, well, like, from the way it seems, one of the major messages is always around taking care of people and being good to people. What do you think helps others
So
or
I will
people
say
listening to
that
this stay resilient
with that
today?
same privilege, of like having my father as part of my life, I also lost him in 2016 to cancer, and yeah, so like I had like the most amazing man and mentor, but like there's a lot of people out there today that like still at 30, 5, 36, 37 years old have their dad. I don't. Like I do not anymore have this person to go back and lean on to help me. Like it's not like I'm done learning,
Mm,
I'm done living. I'm done dealing with torment or problems, or like nothing bad can ever happen to me again. Like I have a lot of life left to live, and I have to do it on my own now. And I have to lead two boys in my wake, as well too. So I have to take the mantle just the same. So
yeah.
I like when I think about like the situation that somebody, like if somebody didn't have a dad like I did, it doesn't mean that they can't achieve what I'm going to achieve myself personally. Because like again, like I'm a statistic, bro. And at the same time, like because of that, everything that stares at me is like, well, he's gone now. The only thing that kept you here, that
Hmm.
created your success, that saved your life even at one point, he's gone. So what does that mean for you? Does that mean that you slowly slip away as well too? And that's it's a loud voice in my head sometimes, without a doubt. But I also understand the identity of legacy and breaking curses. So like my dad, and part of his legacy to me is that he broke curses. He broke curses around things that he had to suffer through, that I don't have to suffer through. And it wasn't anything like super crazy, and really it was generational. So like his dad started to
Hmm.
break those things, he broke them further, and I lived a great life because of it. I'm gonna like that's what I'm living for. I'm passing that torch on to two more boys who can live in this world and make it a better place ultimately through happiness and
Yeah.
fulfillment of their own life. And to me, there's some just like intrinsic beauty around this identity of like deeply digging inside for yourself and saying, well, what's my purpose? What's my meaning? And a lot of people have a hard time finding that as well too. I mean, I got people in my life that, especially through the rebellion that we train, that I've had great upbringings. They got plenty of money. They got a big house. They got nice cars. They got kids. They'll come to meetings and be like, "Hey, I'm doing training because I want to get better at sales,
Mm-hmm.
but also I've lost my fire. I don't feel like I don't feel like I know who I am anymore. Like this is just a natural part of life, to be quite frank with you. But all of us
Yep.
intrinsically, we have something that motivates us. We have to always be latched onto that thing. And for me, it's God, bro. Like the most transparent answer is that through my faith, my life has been saved more times than I can count. And my marriage has been saved because of it. My relationship with my family, my siblings, my mom, who's still alive today, my friends, the ones that have deemed me worthy and allowed me to stick around in their lives. Yeah, like my faith is what saved those things. And so I don't lean back on like, oh, read a bunch of business books if you're out of sync in sales, or like go to a seminar or a conference, where there's all these gurus are speaking about
Mm-hmm.
sales and like how to get more leads and whatever else. I think it ultimately
Yep.
starts right here with yourself. And I would encourage people to lean into the spiritual side of their
Mm-hmm.
life. That a lot of people look at that as like Skittles and rainbows and fluffy stuff, but ultimately, like it is where the real growth happens, man. Where I had to admit, a lot of things in my
I'm
life and be
fully with it.
transparent about a lot of things in my life to get them
I
out, to get
agree.
them on the table, to be able to conquer them and to be able to progress through them and become a better Dale in the first place. There wasn't anything else in this world that was going to get me to do that, other than my faith.
I've been on a spiritual journey myself for the past, let's say, since 2018. In 2018, I had gained a bunch of weight. I got engaged to an Indian girl. It was a good Indian family. I'm Indian too, so it was like the perfect picture. But she was a fucking headache, and she started to say, "You have a problem. You have a problem. You have a problem. I want you to go see somebody." So I said, "Okay." And I said, you pick the person and I'll go see them. Let's see if I really have a problem. She picked the person, a woman coach, life coach. 6 months later, this life coach said, leave that bitch. So I ended up splitting and went on the transformation of my entire life. I lost 20 kgs. I was the ladies' man. I was getting attention more than I've ever got before. And I was always the skinny, ugly Indian kid with big teeth. Now I was a man and I could dress well and be presentable to people. I was in business and things were good. And as soon as I started to move into like the law of attraction and vibrations and certain frequencies on how the laws of the universe work, I was able to discover something very different. And even just 2 weeks ago, like I said, I was really sick, dude. Like the past 2 weeks with that flu, my body, I thought I was dying. I really thought like, this is it. It's done. I've taken too many drugs in my life. It's all catching up with me. I'm going to die next week. And I had a phone call with my daughter, who I don't see now because I had some issues with my wife or ex-wife. And I said to myself, when things are better, is this the father you're going to be? Is this who you're going to be on the other side of the phone for your daughter? Or when she does come back into your life, into your care and your responsibility, is this the man you are going to be like every day, or are you going to go back to being who you were, a business owner, a man who helps everybody where he can, a good family member? And I was this close to giving up again, and this is only 2 weeks ago. I'm 38 years old this year. I've been through the most controversial trials and tribulations of my life, through family, partner, spouse, my child, and without having that spiritual fulfillment to say, like, bro, this is it. If you don't become who you're supposed to be, you're just going to be like everybody else who you said you never wanted to be like. That has been the person who talks about what he used to do instead of what you are now. And that made a huge, huge difference to me. And one of the things that really, really helped me get out of that is the community I'm around, a community of different people. people who think like
Yeah,
me.
that's what the Sales Rebellion is
How
founded on. I
important
wanted to
is
build a community
community
for
to you in
salespeople
your
that
journey today?
it actually was a literal community and not like sponsored by a company or, so I had some weird strings attached to it. I just wanted to build a community for salespeople and that wanted and
Hmm.
desired to become better people. And so like we literally lean into this idea that sales and the success of sales comes because we care about ourselves enough to want to become better as humans. And you can't do that by just like going out and life coaching people like that will actually buy into that kind of stuff, or sales coaching people that will actually pay for that training. You have to sacrifice time, energy, effort, money, and go meet people in places like where they can afford it, and or they can't, but they're skeptical. And you have to earn their trust and build something around those people without any type of
Hmm.
recognition for it, and ultimately without like seeking reciprocation at any rate, period. My dad was really good at teaching me that as well too. My dad shows up a lot in my life, right? But so when I built the Sales Rebellion, we started with just like, yo, let's meet up in person. Let's get like 30, 40 people together in
Hmm.
Orlando here. We'll have some speakers talk. We'll let everybody mix and mingle. We had people passing leads, people hiring other people from meeting them at these events. I mean, it was fantastic when we first got, and this was pre-COVID, right? And then COVID hit, and we leaned into more of a virtual community. We have a free Slack group um, as an example. It's
Hmm.
got a couple thousand people in it. We're always in there having fun, sharing wins, telling stories, giving ideas. It's just a bunch of homies, just hanging out, having a good time, wanting to be better at sales, right? So community is the thing to me. It's the future from that
Hmm.
perspective. Like because it's always been the most relevant piece of the puzzle for anybody's success. That without a community, you are nothing. And even the people that have like built these massive empires, like they burn down because there's no one there once the walls are put up and the castles are put in place. Like there's no one there to enjoy them except for that one person. And that's why you hear such tragic stories about people at 50 plus years old committing suicide with all this success. And because they have no happiness, they have no family, they have no legacy, they have nothing to live for, they have no community, nobody is here for them anymore. They burnt everything down on the way to the top of their hill.
Hmm.
And it's a very lonely place at the top. I promise you, I've been there. So without a community, it doesn't matter, period. So that it is the single most important thing to us, and that's
I
what
know
I
the feeling.
built around this company when I first got started.
So, two more questions until we wrap up. If you could marry community up with one other habit to consistently perform every day so that you can be
That's a really
successful,
good question.
what would you
So
say that
I
one
have an
habit
actual, like, I have a
should be?
belief that life is a rhythm, and a rhythm, like it, coincides with what we call a cadence in music. A cadence is like the perfect amalgamation of notes. So you put all this perfect symphonic sound together, creates a cadence, which is a rhythm. It's something that
Hmm.
that essentially like you
Yeah.
bob and weave to, like you live by. And so I have this idea ultimately that like a rhythm is abstract, because at the same time
Hmm.
that like you can put these
Hmm.
perfect notes together, that the most symphonic and like harmonious and beautiful sounds that are ever made are people just understanding like, well, this is how we started it, well, let's keep it going, like a jam band or a blues night where everybody gets on stage, and it's just like the most beautiful thing you've ever seen in your life, but no one knew it was going to go that way. They're just hanging out,
Hmm.
playing music, having a good time. Now, I think, when it comes to the habit side, I think it's very important for people to understand that
Hmm.
habits will typically dig you into a hole and create so much consistency to the point that you're suddenly living the definition of insanity, doing the same thing over and over again, expecting some type of, you get consistency and failure, really is like what happens. So I'm a big believer in people understanding that this idea of
Hmm.
like living by a rhythm is really living in an abstract
Yep.
space, and like wake up in the morning at 5 a.m. every day. That's great if that's like a habit that you like and helps you to be successful on top of your day, motivated, feeling good about yourself. But if you do the same thing consecutively every day over and over again at 5 a.m., it's going to harm you more than it's going to do good for you. And look, there's plenty of people out there that would disagree with me. There's like, the jackos of the world. They're like, I do the
Hmm.
same thing every day. Look at how successful I am. So, but at the same time,
I would
there's
never
like
do that.
if
I hate
those
waking
people,
up
I'm telling
early.
you right now, the people that they wake up early, they ice bath every morning, whatever they do, right? Like those same people would wake up and instead like enjoy the human experience and like this idea that life is a mystery,
Dude.
and that like if I want to seek and hit my goals and it's been 6 months and I'm just saying to myself like, well, just keep doing the same thing, like
Hmm.
you'll, if you're consistent, you'll get there. Like sure, consistency is a great part of the process, right? But like maybe calling that person every day trying to get them on the phone is literally never going to work. And like maybe what you should do is go drop a letter off at their office with a giant coffee stain on it that says like, hey, I made you a coffee coaster since I know how much you hate sales and marketing. I figured you could just use this one to set your coffee on instead. And like the idea is that if I can break the typical patterns for other people, I break them for myself as well too. I breathe new life into who I am, and that's a habit that I can get behind. So if someone's listening, they're like, well, what does that mean? It means this: look at your week coming up, and every day do one thing different, no matter where it is in the day. It can be morning, afternoon, night, whatever. 2 a.m. Nothing good happens at 2 a.m., by the way. But the point being, like, just do one thing a little different. Like instead of driving this one path that you go to work every day down the highway, take the back roads just once and see what happens. Like, just make one choice in your life to do something different, and getting in the rhythm of habitually allowing yourself to like step outside of the comfort zone and do something different. It's like this opportunity to say yes to new things and like build a life of really wonder is the word to use, and that causes people to feel more adventurous about the life that they're living, because otherwise we as humans, we're not meant to sit around all day in a chair and work. That's not what we are or who we are, and we're not meant to live our life for things like working every day from
Hmm.
8 to 5 and like the prep to get there from 5 a.m. too, right? We're not meant for those things. Like it's why
Hmm.
so many people struggle with things like, I gotta take my kids to school, make them breakfast. All like my mornings suck, like, well, it actually they don't. It sucks because at 8 a.m. you have to go to work. That's
Hmm.
really the issue, right? So like if people can sit back and understand that one true fact, and I'm not a proponent of like not working. I love to work, right? But the point is that we
Yep.
have to see the irregularities that we've created in life that are normalcies. Break the pattern. You know, and if you hear this and you quit your job, God bless you. And if you become an
Yep.
entrepreneur and
I'm
you
with you.
pursue your dreams, God bless you. If that's the thing that you needed to hear today, then good for
Listen,
you.
quitting my job, mate. It's why I do this. Um, last May was when I went through my separation. The podcast was the one thing, as a result of building an agency, that kept me going. Like, again, the ability and the privilege of being able to speak to people like yourself. I've had over 250 CEOs that run 7, 8, and 9 figure companies that I've been able to have conversations with, learn, and grow. In the pandemic, I took the biggest risk of my life to build an agency, an appointment setting agency, in March 2020. And I've never looked back. I've never had so much fulfillment. I've never earned so much money. But the amount of great people I've met, and seeing like just when you're working for a company and you're trying to speak to senior executives or decision makers, you see them on this massive pedestal of people that are so hard to reach. But then when you sort of step into the realm of being an entrepreneur, a business owner, and just having regular conversations with people like this, you start to see that everybody is fairly the same. Most people have the same problems, but everybody is human at the end of the day. So, last thing to wrap up the pod, it's 2:57, just turned 2:58 for me. It's March 7th, 2024. What are you doing, Dale, at 2:58, whatever the time difference is on your side? I think it's 10, it's approaching 10. What are you doing at 10 a.m. on March 7th, 2034?
How's that?
Are you on mute? I think you just went on mute.
That was weird. Uh, 10 years from now, today, I'll be living
Yep,
in
now you're
ultimate
good.
freedom. I live in it now, but I'll be pursuing it on a level that I didn't even expect to experience in the first place. And what by ultimate freedom, I'm talking about ultimate freedom of time, of family, of finance, of love, of the passions that I have for life. Ultimate freedom of giving other people the right kind of experiences to be able to better their lives as well too. Ultimate freedom of being like more impactful in general as a human on this earth, and not being, strictly assigned to things like time. And time is precious, but there's ultimate freedom of time in our lives that if we seek out, you know,
Mm-hmm.
diligently enough, we will find them. And that's where I'll be in 10 years from now. I'll be living in that ultimate freedom on a level that's unprecedented.
So in
We'll
10
see you
years, we're
then.
going to have this interview at this date and this time. I'm going to book it in now. See if that's happening. Thank you.
They can find
Thank
us
you
at
very much, Dale, for joining us today.
thesalesrebellion.com.
Where can
You can
people
holler
find
at
you if
me
they want to
on
speak
platforms
speak
like
to you in more detail?
linkedin.com/in/Copier Warrior. I'm on all social feeds at Dale Rebel Leader, X, Facebook, Instagram, you name it. Come find us. Come find our free Slack community. Come hang out. Much love.
Thank you again, dude. Until next time, we will see you again. All right.